Welcome everyone to this Better Way Thursday. We are so excited to have Russ Arnold with us. Russ and I go way, way back. He was my husband's boss at my husband's very first real adult job. And so I was super excited to have him join us today. But he is a longtime marketing professional, and we are thrilled with his willingness to come talk to us about how to promote ourselves and get noticed within our own organization. So feel free to jump in with questions if you have them. And otherwise, Russ, I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin. Well, I am honored to be here. What a great organization. I had, a month or two ago, I had seen some posts about tech moms on LinkedIn and was totally intrigued. It looked like a really great idea. And so I reached out to Trina and just asked, hey, is there anything I can do to help? Do you need volunteers? Can we? And so here I am. So very excited to be here with you guys and to just share some thoughts about some things. So I thought I'd start with a quick introduction, and I hope this goes all right because, yeah, there we go. So this is my family. I am been married for coming up on 30 years. It's so sad. I'm so old, but we've been blessed with a lot of great kids. So my oldest is Alex. She's the one in the pink hair. Alex is married to Allie. She's the one in the blue hair. They live in Indianapolis. My second is Caleb. He's in the upper left with the flyaway hair. And he is married to Jordan on the far left. And they currently live in our basement, which has been a lot of fun. And Jordan, as it happens, is a tech woman. She's a programmer. And so I try to talk her into coming on today, but maybe another time. And then our number 3 is Cam. They're kind of in the middle right next to my wife. Cam is married to Sam, who's on the far right, and they live in Portland. And they're both pursuing master's degrees. They're very smart kids. I don't know where they get it. And they get it from their mom is where they get it. And then my lovely wife, Mary, in the middle. So that's us. I also have a few hobbies. I'm actually a jazz saxophone player. I play in a couple of local jazz bands. It's just for fun, and it's something that I really enjoy. I also like to get up and go snowboarding in the mountains during the winter. So love Utah. Love being back here. We were gone for a few years, so I'm excited to be back. So really quick, I just wanted to give just a quick summary of my experience and background. I actually went to BYU, graduated in communications, which is probably one of the least useful degrees, but I enjoyed it. I loved it. It was something that was a skill set that I really liked and I wanted to develop. And I actually started out my career in insurance sales, which it's about as low as you can get. I think it's just a few notches above used car sales and lawyers. So really started kind of at the bottom, but it taught me a lot of good things. And I finally ended up landing an opportunity in sort of a marketing role. And that's when, for me, the light bulb clicked. And I realized, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what really gets me excited. So I've been in marketing for close to 25 years, working with different technology and consumer product brands. Most recently, I was at Cricut, which is the crafting technology company. Spent about 4.5 years there. It was a great experience, great brand. I was heading up their marketing and product launch there. Before Cricut, I was actually working for KitchenAid out in Michigan. Amazing brand. Love the KitchenAid brand. Had the opportunity to work. I was responsible for the blenders and food processor category, and so that was a lot of fun. Worked for BlendTech prior to that. That was here in Utah County. Also worked for Blender Bottle. I guess I focused on a lot of blending brands. That was my my area. But and before that, I had worked for Philips through some acquisitions. So I've had the opportunity to work in some fairly large organizations, but I've also worked for small companies. I've been in some startups where we literally just ran out of money and everybody was like, okay, I guess we're done. And got to experience a couple of the internet bubbles and tech bubbles back in 2000 and in 2008. So that's a little bit about me. All right, so let's get to it. So what is the problem? Why can't I just work hard, keep my head down, do the work, and get the recognition I deserve? Well, in a perfect world, right, we would. All we'd have to do is just work hard, do our part, everything would fall into place, and we'd get promoted, we'd get raises and bonuses, and the world would be at our feet, right? The reality, unfortunately, is not quite as clean. And this is probably, if you take away nothing else, I hope the main message that you remember is nobody cares. And what I mean by that is everyone has their own priorities. Everyone has their own objectives and their goals. And no one is going to care about your progress as much as you do. And that's an important mindset, because we can't rely solely on other people to make things happen for us, or expect that they will, recognize the things we're doing and do things to help us on that path. It's up to you. It's up to me. We have to take charge, as it were, of our progress and our success. Your manager obviously is supposed to be one who helps you on this journey and is a coach and a mentor and all that. That doesn't always happen, and so you can't necessarily rely on your manager, your teammates, or anybody else. And so everything that we're going to talk about today is really about, okay, what are some of the steps we can take? What are some of the things we can do to push our progress forward and our growth, and get the recognition that we deserve for the work that we do. And I want to emphasize that these principles really apply whether you are just happy to be an individual contributor in a specific role, and that's totally fine, because a lot of people find a niche, they find an area that they love to work, and that's where they want to stay, and they just want to do that role, that work, and enjoy that, and be happy there, and that's fine. Or if you have aspirations that, hey, I want to eventually grow into maybe a role where I'm helping lead one or more other people. I have my own team. Maybe you want to eventually lead a department or take over the entire company. That's a great goal, and you should, because we need more women running companies. But these principles will apply regardless of what your aspirations are. And I want to start with what's called the power-based pyramid, and what this is. I had the opportunity to participate in some very expensive leadership training that KitchenAid paid for at the University of Notre Dame. And one of the areas they covered was this, what they call the power-based pyramid. So this is from that training that we received there. But it really helps us understand, where does our influence come from, and how do we build up that influence within any organization? Okay. So at the base of the pyramid, it starts with our personal characteristics, right? And obviously skills are sort of a foundational part of that, right? So all the things that you need to know to do the job. And hopefully that's a lifelong pursuit, right? We should be, continually learning, growing. Things change, technologies change, programming languages change, the needs of organizations and people change. So that's something that is, it's kind of a given, right? We should be doing that. But then the other piece, the attributes, is where I want to spend a little time, because honestly, the attributes are as important or more than the skills. And we'll talk about why in a minute. But first, I want to share the story of a woman named Lindsay. So when I was at Cricut, I was starting to build a team there, and I hired this woman named Lindsay. And she didn't have a ton of directly related experience to what we were hiring her for, but I could tell she had a lot of really good attributes, right? She was the type of person who could get things done. And so we hired her, and she did great. And after about a year, we got her trained in the area that she was working in, and she got comfortable. And then she started really growing and building this role that she had. Well, within like a year, she was promoted to a senior manager. In another year and a half, she was promoted to director, and that's a pretty quick career path. But the reason that she was promoted, and the reason really came down to her attributes. Lindsay was one of those people who was just a perfect combination of, she was able to get a lot of things done. She was unflappable. She never got, exasperated or overly frustrated by people or situations. She always was pushing for the solution rather than focused on, okay, who messed up or who's to blame for this problem. She would just focus on how do we get out of this. And everyone loved to work with her. And that's why the attributes are, frankly, more important than your skills. You can be the best programmer in the world, the best marketer in the world. If nobody wants to work with you, that's going to make for a very difficult career. So just quickly, some of those attributes that are key for success. So being a creative problem solver. Being able to look at a problem and come up with multiple ways that it can be solved, right? Being willing to think outside of what maybe has always been done, and coming up with new and unique ways to get to the goal. Being persistent, and this is a big one. And in Lindsay's case, she could push organizations and push departments very persistently, and everybody loved her, right? You can be persistent and still be nice, and that was what was so amazing. I'll give you an example. One of the big challenges so Lindsay was responsible for, in the Cricut organization, what we call the product launch team. And this team kind of sat in between the product group and sales and marketing, right? And so she and her team would work with the product teams to say, okay, what new products are coming out? How are we going to plan for these and launch these? And then she would work with sales and marketing. What do you guys need to be successful to market and sell these new products, and make sure all of that happened, and kept track of, tons of specific details and assets that had to go in to making that work. And there were lots of friction points, right? Because the sales team would go out, make commitments to our retailers like Walmart, Target, Best Buy, say, yeah, we're going to have this new product. It'll be shipped to you on this date. And then Lindsay would work with the product teams, and they'd say, oh, we're going to be late, right? And that's not a good thing. But she had the ability to, stay calm and focus on the end goal, right? Which is, okay, we need to get this, we need to keep the partners happy and get this done as quickly as we can. And she had those attributes that allowed her to be successful. And again, everyone loved to work with her, and that's why the not a jerk thing is important, because again, it doesn't matter how good you are, it doesn't matter how brilliant you are. If you're a jerk, it really gets in the way of success. So creative problem solver, persistent, dependable, reliable. So when you say you'll do something, you do it. You follow up. Calm under pressure. So with the salesperson screaming at you, why is this late? I already promised them this was coming. Not getting ruffled, but staying calm and working through, okay, let's work the problem. Focusing on the end goals. And you guys know people like this. There are people that just generally always have a positive outlook. That's a very powerful attribute for the business world. And then being flexible, right? So, and that ties really closely to creative problem solving. Yeah, maybe we've done it the same way for 5 years in a row. This time we have to do something different, and being flexible to say, okay, well, that's not going to work. How do we solve it another way? Not being a jerk, and then willing to take responsibility for outcomes. And what that one means, so it's easy to take responsibility for the specific work that has to be done. Oh, I have to program this set of algorithms or whatever. But what's the outcome? Well, we need a successful product. And so being willing to say, okay, beyond what I'm doing, what else has to happen for this to be successful, and how can I help? That's a very powerful mindset, because it shows your manager and the people that you work with that you're not just looking at your little area, but you're taking a larger view of what needs to happen for us as a team, as an organization, to be successful. And there are sometimes, opportunities where we can have an impact, or where these key attributes will come to light, right? And it's usually when things are going wrong, right? And so what can happen when things are going wrong, when everybody's stressed and everybody's frustrated, we can react one of two ways. We can get frustrated and angry and lash out at, well, if these guys had done this on time, our work wouldn't be delayed, or whatever. Or we can, kind of swallow that pride and say, okay, what needs to be done? What can we do now, given the situation we're in? How do we get out of it? I had a really interesting thing happen while I was at KitchenAid. And it wasn't until after it happened. It was one of those things where it wasn't until after it happened that I realized how important it was. But I had joined KitchenAid, initially responsible for the commercial area. And then about a year in, they decided, hey, we need to, develop a bigger blender business. And so I was asked to lead that team. We had a big sales meeting. And sales meetings, for those of you who don't know, are the worst, because you basically have the entire sales organization. They get to come and they get to nitpick and harass you about why things aren't perfect for them. But it's also an opportunity for showcasing new products and new things that are coming. So every year, KitchenAid would bring all the salespeople from all over the globe. So not just the US, but this was, the Europe team, Asia team, Latin America. Everybody would come, and we're in this big meeting room. And so it's my turn to present, and most of the presentations up to then had been pretty quiet. I get up and I pull up my first slide about our blender roadmap, and immediately 50 hands shoot up, right? Because this is a very hot category for every region, and they all have questions and concerns about what's going on, because they need more, they need better products, they need more products than what we're currently offering. And I had been in the role for maybe a week or two, and everybody knew that I had been in the role for literally a week or two. But as the questions started coming, I just took the questions and I answered as if it had been my responsibility all along, right? Because what would have been easy, it would have been to say, well, the people before apparently didn't plan for that, but we're going to do things, I didn't blame the other guys. I just took the approach of, well, this is what we're going to try to do. And yeah, we acknowledge that's a problem. We're going to try to, we've got these plans in place. We've got these products coming and we think it'll address that. And just tried to stay calm and not blame anybody, but just take responsibility, right? For what was now mine. And I didn't think too much of it, but afterwards, I had a bunch of people talk to me afterwards about how impressed they were that I was just taking the responsibility, right? Just right out of the gate. Because what you'll find in a lot of business settings, people like to find people to blame because you don't want to look bad, right? You don't want to look like you screwed up. You don't want to look like that your team didn't deliver or that you didn't do what you were supposed to. And so a lot of corporate jockeying has to do with, well, who's responsible and who's to blame and why didn't they do it right? And so it was just, people were surprised that somebody was willing to just say, okay, we'll fix it and we'll take the issues and the challenges and we'll move forward. That's my humble brag for the day. Okay, so let's keep moving. As we look at the next block of the pyramid, performance. Okay, so this is your ability to get things done, to get results, right? And the keys with performance, number one, you need to understand what is expected of you. And you need to understand how that's going to be measured. You have to have clear goals and objectives and a time frame, right? And this is, and don't assume, so as you're working with your manager or whoever, if you don't have that clearly understood and documented, then ask them for it. What are my goals? What are my objectives? What am I being measured against? And under what time frame? Because the last thing you want to do is work and work and work for 6 months or a year, and then you show up to your annual review and your manager's like, well, I really wanted you to do these things over here, even though you had done a whole list of things that you thought were the right things to do, right? So press your manager, your supervisor to get you those so that you understand exactly what is expected of you. I recommend having regular one-on-ones with your manager, and a good manager should be doing that anyway. But weekly or every couple of weeks, you should be sitting down with your manager and primarily reviewing how are you doing against those goals, right? So because by the end of the year or the end of the performance period, you should already know, and your manager should be very clear about how you performed against those goals. It shouldn't ever be a surprise because you've been talking about those all the way along. And sometimes goals change and sometimes objectives change, and that's fine. But having those regular touch bases and making sure that it's documented keeps both of you on the same page about what's expected and what you're doing and how you're performing. I would even recommend that you, if it's not documented somewhere, send an email to your manager with a bullet list of, hey, thanks for the meeting. This was awesome. Here's what I came away with as my objectives for the next 6 months. Boom, 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 boom. Have I missed anything? Is there anything else that I should add to this list? And that way you've got a documented, trail of this is what I was asked to do. And then the flip side is you need to keep track of what you do, right? So you can't assume that your manager will remember or keep a running list of all the great things you've accomplished. So you need to keep a list, right? Keep a running list of all the things that you accomplished, the projects you've completed, and what the results were. right? So as often as possible, you want to have, some kind of a hard number or metric against that that accomplishment, right? So for example, let's say you were asked to program a certain thing and they said, we need this in 2 weeks, and you got it done in 1 week. Okay, well, that's 50% faster than was expected, right? Write that down, make a note of that. Say, hey, I finished this project in half the time that I was given to do it. And it looks like the cat wants to go out. So she's bored with this already. So, because again, nobody cares about your success as much as you. So if you keep track, keep a list, keep it however you want to manage it, by the end of the quarter, by the end of the year, when it comes time for a performance review, you can now basically hand your manager a full breakdown of, look at all the stuff that I've done and the accomplishments that I've made over the course of this time period. And that's not bragging. That's not that's a perfectly normal thing, because again, your manager's not going to remember, and they're not going to try to keep track. But what they are going to do is they're going to need ammunition to be able to go to their higher ups to say, yes, Robin needs a raise and a promotion because look at all this stuff she did. You're giving them the ammo to fight for you. And that information is critical. And so if you just keep track of that, it makes it so much easier for those review processes. Okay. Reputation. So the next sort of building block of your power base is your reputation. So how are you viewed within the organization? And really, this comes down to your personal characteristics and your performance, right? That's what builds your reputation. Is Robin a person who gets things done and is really easy to work with and always helps find solutions for problems? And that's really what builds your reputation. You don't have to be loud and boisterous and shamelessly promoting yourself. In fact, that usually backfires, right? Because people think you're trying to cover something up or whatever. But by developing those skills, by honing those attributes, and then making sure that you're doing your best to perform and accomplish the goals, that's really the base of your reputation. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Going back to how we said the attributes are more important, because what do people say if there's a new person coming into the team or a new boss or whatever? They don't say, "Oh man, she's an amazing programmer." They may say that, but more importantly, she's an amazing programmer and she gets things done and people love working with her, right? Those are the kind of things that really matter and that people remember and people talk about you. Okay, so this portion of the pyramid is essentially who you are, right? As a person. Now, the next phase or the next area is your allies or your network within the organization. And I think this is one of the areas that a lot of people maybe don't appreciate or don't recognize how important it is. And the reason it's so important is because, and I've seen this time and time again, when there's discussions about bonuses, about raises, about promotions, the first thing they do is ask around, right? Whether it's a formal 360 review or whether it's informally, the boss just goes around talking to a few people. Hey, how's Robin doing? What has she been good to work with? And so it's important that you get to know the people around you and you build relationships with those people, because whether right, wrong, or indifferent, they're going to have some influence on how you are viewed within the organization. So who should you be getting to know? Obviously, your immediate team and the people that you work with. Adjacent teams, so the teams that your team interacts with on a fairly regular basis. But then also really other departments, even if they're not areas where your team closely interacts with, it's a great idea to get to know people in other departments, other areas of the company. And then you can look around and maybe identify some individual managers, some individual leaders and executives that you admire. And those are people who you can then try to get to know and build as part of your network as well, right? So how do we do that? First of all, literally make a list. Like, make a list of, these are all the people that I want to try to get to know, build as part of my network and part of my allies. And then start planning formal or informal opportunities to get to know these people, right? So go sit next to them at the cafeteria if your organization has one, or schedule one-on-ones with people that you want to get to know. And the great thing about, especially if you're new to an organization, you can play the new guy card like for months, right? That will get you all kinds of opportunities, right? Because you can say, hey, I'm new here. I'm trying to get to know the company, the organization, and how things work. Would you have 10 minutes to talk and to give me some of your thoughts? And when you're talking to these people, obviously you want to get to know them on a personal level, but the thing about people is they love to talk about themselves, right? But they also love to give advice. People love to give advice. So all you have to do, if you want, and this, say the head of the entire department or whatever, you want to try to get to know because this is a leader that you admire. Hey, can I get your advice on some things? Right? They love to tell you how they got where they are, or recommendations on how to be successful within the organization, within the industry, et cetera. So ask them questions about themselves, about how they got there, ask advice, and they will almost always be willing to meet with you, because people love to talk about themselves. They love to talk about why they're so great and how they're so awesome, right? And so you're feeding into that ego a little bit. And then in some organizations, they will have a formal process for assigning mentors. But if the organization you're in doesn't have that, then identify one or two people who you think would be a good mentor for you, right? and go ask them. Say, hey, I'm looking for someone to kind of help and mentor me in this area. I'm new to this organization, or I'm new to this type of work. I'd love to meet with you maybe once a month or every quarter and talk about what I'm learning, and you can give me thoughts and tips on what I can do to be successful here in the organization and long term. If there's a specific career path that you kind of see that you want to chase, like, hey, I want to be the chief technology officer one day at this company, go talk to them. Say, hey, can you be my mentor? I want to do your role someday, and I'd love to learn how to do that. And again, especially if you're the new person, everybody's usually willing to give you some time to help out. And you can ask just all the questions you want. So build a network. Okay. And then the last piece. Yes.
Can I hop in with a quick question? With a lot of us working on virtual teams and not in the office, and especially like a lot of our tech moms are looking specifically for virtual positions, and that adds an additional barrier for these kinds of informal things. And one of the things I was thinking, one of the ideas I was thinking was to try to get yourself invited to meetings where you maybe wouldn't necessarily be. Now, is that a good idea or a bad idea?
That's a great question. So it depends on the meeting and the nature of the organization, right? Because some organizations, they're not super hierarchical, right? So they're open to having everybody involved in whatever. So I would kind of gauge it first on that, but also, talk to your manager. Say, hey, I'd love to be involved in some of these meetings. Is that, do you think that's appropriate? Is that something that would make sense? And they can also help guide you on, on that. But I think it varies a lot, because you'll find some leaders in some groups are very like, they're very closed off, and they only want certain people or whatever in the room. And other times, you may get a no, just because, having too many people in a meeting can make it tough to be effective. Right. So, but, it never hurts to ask. And, especially with your immediate manager or people that you work with, hey, is this something I could be a part of? And it may open a lot of doors. And if the answer is no, then that's great, and no harm done.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, you bet. And lastly, your position, which is the actual like position of your role in the company. Now, the interesting thing is, and you guys have probably seen this with other people you've worked with, there are people in the organization that don't have a very high position that have a huge influence, right, over what goes on and what happens. And it's generally because they have the skills, the attributes, they perform well, they've built a strong reputation, people trust them, and they have a lot of allies and a big network across the organization. And that's really, where their power comes from. So you don't necessarily have to have that fancy title to be a very influential person within your organization. Okay. All right. So one other quick point, and then we'll probably jump to some Q&A. So having the right manager makes a huge difference. Now, obviously, you only have so much control over this, right? But the reason I bring this up is because, well, let me start with an example, and then we'll just talk about a few tactics. So, I hired a woman named Emily, and she was a rock star, and I know that's overused, so I'll come up with a better one. She was a machine. She was one of the hardest working people I've ever been around. And she loved it, right? Like, that was for her to be fulfilled, she had to have like 70 things on her to-do list. That was just what kept her going and made her, motivated. So she was awesome. And she made mistakes like everybody does, but she didn't never bothered her. She was like, oh, okay, well, we'll do it different. And she was just zero ego and was all about push, move the needle. Let's move things forward. Let's get things done. And she would ask, if somebody brought up something that wasn't necessarily a great idea or a great, proposal, she'd be like, that doesn't sound like a good idea. She was very open about, and not in a mean way, but just like, well, that seems like it might be counterproductive. Help me understand that. She was very good at just getting things done. She was great. She was one of my best employees. About 3 years in, she decided, hey, I really want to try my hand at this other area of the company. She was in marketing. She wanted to get into the product management side of the business. And I said, great, product management is awesome. You'll love it. It's a lot of fun. And for her, it was a good next step, right? Because she was trying to broaden her experience for future opportunities. The problem was the role that was available to her was under a manager that I knew was not great, right? So I did my best. And I was in a tricky situation because on the one hand, I want her to succeed and I want her to be successful. But I was worried that this other manager wouldn't be a good fit for her and wouldn't really help her as much as she needed. And so, I couldn't and maybe I should have just said, that this other manager is a jerk and don't go there. But I tried to give Emily lots of questions to say. I said, okay, I would just make sure you're comfortable with all these things. Ask the manager, how they're going to do this, how they handle this, what, and so she went through, did her due diligence, asked all the questions, and and was satisfied that this worked. So she made the move, went over there. About a year and a half later, that manager fired her and a couple of other people. And it was the absolute dumbest decision of any decision that's ever been made in the world. But the problem was this manager was not a good manager. She was focused on her and on making herself look good. And she undercut people, she undermined people, and she just didn't, unfortunately, she didn't work for her employees like a good manager does. So what you need to do as you're interviewing for positions and interviewing for opportunities, ask, ideally you'll interview with the person who will be managing you. But try to get as much information about that person, their management style, how many people have they promoted in the last couple of years? How many people on their team have left, for maybe not great reasons, because a good manager will not only help you learn and grow and within your role and within the team, they will be a champion for you, right? And they will be pushing for you to get promoted, for you to get advanced in whatever way that you're wanting to. And so if you don't have that person, then it just makes things a lot harder, right? So as much as you can, make sure you've got a manager who has your back. And again, it's not always something that's in your complete control, but that's something that you want to try to. And in some cases, it might mean after you join a company, you may need to look at, transferring to another group, another team, another department, to get into a better place. And sometimes we have to put up with a bad manager for a while because it's just where we are and there's not a lot we can do. But as much as you can, that's going to be a big part of your success. Unfortunately, it's a bigger part of your success than it should be. But that's kind of the reality. Okay. Just a few random things, and this is, by the way, this is Suki. She's our little void here. So a couple of random things that I wish I had known that have really helped me to kind of it's helped given me more confidence, right? Because that's one of the biggest challenges, right, that we face, is being confident in ourselves, being confident in our ability to do things and to be successful, and and being confident that we do deserve the raise or the promotion or whatever, right? So a couple of quick things. Most people are not any smarter or better than you. And I'm telling you, it is amazing how many not smart people are in business. There's a lot of them, right? And some of them are even in positions of power and authority, which is really sad. Just because they have a title or an education or even experience doesn't always mean they're competent, right? It's not automatic. And I know you would think, well, surely they've been to Harvard and they blah, blah, blah. Nope. They're some of the dumbest people that I worked with have very nice resumes, right? Now, obviously, there are people that have specific technical knowledge and technical expertise, right? And that's great. But that doesn't mean that they know everything, right? So just because they're an expert in one specific area doesn't mean that they're an expert in everything. But a lot of times they think they are, right? And the reason this is important is because you have good ideas that are just as good as theirs, right? And that for me was a revelation, right? Because if I didn't have the title or the experience, I often would think, well, then I mean, my ideas probably aren't that great, right? Some of my best ideas as a marketing executive have come from my wife, who she has a degree in special education, but has not worked a day of corporate, world in her life, but she has really good ideas. And I'll tell her something, she'll be like, that's dumb. Don't do that because people won't like that, So you have very valid ideas, whether or not you have all of the experience in education. Everybody's making things up. I mean, I know that sounds kind of funny, but it's true. Most people are just making things up as they go. And so if you feel like, well, I'm just making things up as I go, welcome to the crowd. Everybody's in that boat. Nobody, and the reason is because even with my, 25 years in marketing experience, right? I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? The future is not going to be the same as the past. And so, that experience can help us to make decisions and judgments, but things are changing every day, right? So what made sense 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago may not necessarily work or make sense today because things have changed, especially like Robin was mentioning with the, the change from working from home and stuff, that has put dynamics in a completely different space. So don't feel bad. Everybody's making it up. And those who think they know everything are usually probably the most incompetent. So there's your wisdom for the day. All right, that's all I have. Love to take any other questions or whatever you guys might have.
Russ, that was awesome. And I just put a note in the chat that last slide is like the cure for imposter syndrome. This is what we try to help everyone remember all the time. Everybody's making it up as they go.
Oh yeah.
Nobody's smarter than you. And especially as women, entering the workforce or pivoting into a new area, it's so easy for us to discount everything that we bring and exaggerate all the good things that everybody else has. So I love that slide. So this was so helpful. I love the framework. And everybody, feel free to jump in with your questions. Now, I have a quick question that is really tricky when we're in this space of making sure that we get noticed and that we get promoted. That women often are treated differently than men when it comes to self-promotion and making sure they get noticed. I just did a big research study on double standards and the double bind that women face. Yeah. So in your experience of watching people do this well, how can women navigate around some of those challenges?
If I had the answer to that, I mean, come on, we would solve a lot of problems.
Well, tell us what you've seen that's worked.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the longer I've been in business, and I have, so let me give you just a couple of perspectives. Not everybody, especially men, recognizes when it's happening, right? A lot of us are just blind to it because, we've never experienced it the way that women have. So we don't always have a frame of reference or context for it, right? So, don't assume that everybody sees what you see. At Cricut, one of the great things about working at Cricut was we had a big part of our organization were women. But even there, right? There were things that would happen that just, it wasn't right, and it wasn't. They weren't always treated fairly, and things weren't always equitable. The women that I've seen that have been successful, they simply push through it, and it sucks, right? It's not. It shouldn't be that way, but they push through it, and they call it out. right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it happens, either, and it, in some instances, it may be appropriate to call it out in a meeting setting, but in others, going back to a person or persons and say, hey, this came across really, poorly. Can we talk about, how we do this better? But it's that's a tough one. And I wish I had more like, pixie dust magic wand things that we could just
we'd all take it, Russ. We'd be like,
yeah,
hey,
right. But that's something to look for too. When you're looking at organizations, just try to talk to some women that work there and find out how they treat them.
Yeah.
Trina, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add here because this is something, 30 years in tech, I've dealt with a lot of this, right? So what I would say is don't ever minimize yourself. Always speak up. Even if you hear you're too loud, you're too crisp, you're too whatever it is, just keep doing it anyway, because you're worse off by not saying anything and not speaking up. So, I wish I would have known earlier on in my career to keep doing that and to recognize it. I think Russ was spot on being aware of it. I don't know if I always knew what it was. I know it didn't feel right, but I didn't know how to identify it and to be able to say something or know that I should. And so I think what's great about these calls, and the more we talk about it, the easier it is to identify when somebody's being spoke over in a meeting, to be able to see that they're being assigned to take the notes, that they're being assigned the busy work, that they're, there's a lot of these things that once you're aware of it, you're able to call it out in a friendly way and say, hey, I was talking here, or, I have great ideas. I want to share these. So let me have the opportunity. You get a lot more confident when you're able to identify that it is bias and it's not you. Because I think quite often we assume it's us and not that we're dealing with these environments. So the more we talk about it, the more we say something about it, the more we speak up about it, the more we're able to have the conversations on, hey, that really wasn't appropriate in that meeting, in this, in a side conversation, whatever it is, that's the right scenario, the easier it gets within the environment and the environment changes. So it's not easy, but it is critical.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Kate,
and one other thought.
Oh, go ahead, Russ.
Sorry. If you see it happening to somebody else, call it out. Right. Yes. Be an advocate. Right. And that's something that I wish I had done more. Right. Because, if let's say, Robin is asked to take notes in a meeting, and then the next meeting they ask Robin again to take the notes, speak up and say, hey, why don't we rotate it? Mm-hmm. Right. You don't have to necessarily make a big deal of it, other than, hey, let's rotate it, or hey, let's let them finish before we move on to somebody else.
Kate, I saw that you raised your hand. Do you have a question?
I do. So you had mentioned the woman that she was a rock star. She went to go work for this other person who was not an ideal manager.
Yes.
And I can't recall the person's name, if it was Lindsay.
Emily.
So once she was in that, if she would have come back to you and said, you know what, Russ, I think I made a mistake. This person is a nightmare. What would you have recommended that person do? And how best to move forward if you're like, this is not someone who's going to help me be my best? Because there are those sticky situations. Robin knows about one I just recently went through, and I just literally got out from under this manager, and I have a new position, but I was like, abandoned ship. I have to find a new job now. This is not healthy. So I want to find out, what do you recommend? What's your advice? If you find, so if Emily came back to you and said, oh dear, help.
That's a great question. So I think, as you pointed out, Kate, so usually you can tell pretty quickly if it's just a one-off problem, or if it's symptomatic of, this person is just kind of not going to change. And so assuming that it's one of those where it's just a bad manager and they're not going to change, then I mean, you have to look out for you. You have to do what's in your best interest. The company will get along fine, right? Like sometimes we get too caught up in, oh, well, I've committed to this role or this team or whatever, and that's a good attitude to have until you're in a situation where, it's now impeding your growth, right? Because of a bad manager or whatever. And so, yeah, I would absolutely recommend to Emily, okay, well, first of all, I would have brought her back on my team, like in an instant, because she was awesome. But the other thing, yeah, would be to either, internally, if you can, look for other roles, other opportunities, or if you have to, find another role externally with another company, because it's just not, the time and aggravation is not worth it.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You bet.
Thanks for that question, Kate. I'll just add one more note about dealing with this double bind and double standard. I know we're out of time, but you hinted at this, both of you, Russ and Trina, but enlisting allies and advocates can be really, really valuable. I have to tell all of you tech moms, all the time, I reach out on your behalf and I brag about you in a way that I would not ever feel comfortable bragging about myself. But it's so easy for me to reach out to a random recruiter that I've never met and said, hey, connect with this tech mom. She's looking for a job. Help her out. So enlist allies. I mean, enlist us, but also within your teams, like, if you need someone to toot your horn a little bit, ask a friend and say, hey, could you draw attention to the fact that I did amazing work? And I will do the same thing for you. And if you're not comfortable, like, I wish I were as bold as Trina. In my next life, I'm going to be as bold as her. But in the meantime, I need a little help, and it's hard for me to do that. And so look around for the people that want to help you in this area, because those people are around here. Russ, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I love the friendly model. Russ has got his contact info here. He's demonstrated himself to be a great ally. You can reach out and connect with him on LinkedIn as well. Is it Russell Arnold on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Okay.
And and if I'm not working full time right now, so happy to help with anything you need. If I'm good with resumes, stuff like that. But yeah, reach out. Happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, have a fantastic week. Again, no workshop next week, and we will see you in a few weeks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.